I wasn't a feminist at the time that I was growing up, but I was always a doer. I was never a watcher. And I was, and still am, I think, a survivor. I was born when my parents were living in Rondebosch, so I started my life there. But we moved around a lot. My parents divorced when I was about 2. My mom evidently didn't have sufficient funds to sort of support 3 kids, so one of us, me, was fostered. My eldest sister went to boarding school, to a convent, where she stayed for her whole school life. And my brother went to my grandmother. I was 4 and I turned 5 in the March, but the first memory I had was almost an abandonment memory of my 2 older cousins and my sister, who were also at that convent, taking me into the classroom and leaving me sneaking off, as one does. But I screamed and I performed. I wasn't very passive in. But yeah, I remember that very distinctly. You know, they used to line us up. If somebody did something wrong, there was some transgression, we'd all be hauled out of bed and lined up and smacked with a hairbrush and so on. And also lining up for bath, to have a bath. But ending up being one of the pickies at the back, ending up having to have a bath in cold water, because those little things. But I suppose there must have been good things about it as well, but the memories aren't that great of boarding school. Well, then my mom married my stepdad, and a while after they sort of settled down, then I went to live with them. We were never a cohesive family because my brother stayed on with my grandmother, and as I say, my eldest sister spent her whole life in boarding school. I never really knew the love and security of a father. You know, my dad had nothing to do with us. He was totally indifferent. And my stepdad, you know, in fact, when I was maybe 9 or thereabouts, he said to my mom, "You must tell Bernie to stop calling me Dad. I'm not her dad." That was quite a blow to a little kid. I sort of thought of him as Dad, or maybe I hoped for him to be Dad. But yeah, for some reason he didn't like it. So I had to call him Uncle Viv. No, he was very, very strict, but starting much younger than that, I was sort of quite rebellious because my brother, being a boy, was allowed to do whatever. And I didn't like to wear dresses. I used to want to climb trees the same as he did. I wanted to wear pants because they were just more comfortable. Yeah, and then by the time I got to be sort of living with my stepdad, I think those ways were set in me. We had a lot of freedom in a certain way, but yeah, he was quite. I had to be home at 5 o'clock, and I wasn't. They were quite restrictive. I had ambitions of being a vet when I was a kid, or a journalist, one or both, or maybe a journalistic vet. But when I got to Standard 8, my stepdad dropped the clanger that women don't need to be educated. Waste of time, waste of money. And I had to leave school at the end of Standard 8. I don't know, I think my mom must have been quite sort of weakish. You know, women in that generation had very few choices. She was probably dependent on him, and she had to consider the kids, and so she had to toe the line, and what he wanted, that's what happened. I wasn't depressed, but I was resentful. But you know, I think I'm a survivor, and I didn't let it get me down. I just carried on and took what I could out of life. I didn't even think of it that way. I just carried on, just survived. As a child, when I was told not to play with the children down the road, this was before Group Areas Act, and they had to leave, and I was told that they were coloured, as a child, I thought my mom was talking nonsense. I mean, they weren't blue or pink or orange or whatever, they were the same as me. And most of us, unless we had parents who were politically active, most of us weren't really told these things. We were fed stuff by the Christian, whatever education it was called back then, which was devised obviously by the nationalist government, and that's what we learned. And unless you yourself are disturbed or come across something, you're not likely to find out. Or once you were older and went to varsity and came across people who would tell you these things, for example at UCT, which was called Moscow on the Hill. So it was only when we travelled overseas that I became aware of what was actually going on here, because we started seeing TV, which back then we didn't have here. We started seeing footage of stuff that was going on here in townships and that even once we got television, it was obviously very carefully monitored, so that people weren't exposed to seeing black people in prominent positions, for example. Now, maybe I was politically naive, and I don't excuse myself for it, but that's how it unfolded. And when I think now of the limitations that imposed on us, as much as we were the privileged people, it did limit it. My daughter's married to an Indian chappie. It was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful family, and I think that I would have missed all that had things not changed. Well, once Jamie started prep school, and I had the mornings free, I studied through UNISA, and once I'd got my degree, I then went to UCT. And then I did a teaching diploma, and that was nice, because then I had the sort of a bit of student life that I'd never had as a youngster. And then in the afternoons, I was the typical suburban mom, driving the kids everywhere. And the kids all did loads of things, ballet and music, and they were in school plays and school musicals and soccer and hockey and did everything.
Not enough. That's not enough. That's not enough. I don't have any. Hey, that's my chip. That's my cup. Now, how come Otis is using my cup? I also want some more.
There's plenty in there. There's lots and lots. Let's go and feed. Give.
Quiet, you.
Are you going to feed the birds? Are you going to feed the birds? Come on, come play. Come and throw the seeds. Come. Up there. You must throw them over there. Come on.
Come on. Look at this.
No, she's strict when she needs to be, but she loves her grandkids and she's soft with them, but firm. In other words, disciplined, but not in a nasty way. I think they all love her to bits.
Come, let's go and get supper. I loved being a mom. It was my entire identity. I threw myself into it wholeheartedly. I probably made many mistakes, but I was very, very dedicated. I was probably a pain in the neck, actually. I was such a mother. I think I might have been a little bit overprotective of my kids. My eldest daughter complained about that, but they all turned out to be nice, to be good people.
Who is? The road clothes don't go, you know. Turn around each corner thinking, oh, am I going to have to turn around?
This. I don't like it.
Right, have we got everything?
Yep.
We weren't told.
There's some plain rice.
So sure is.
I did study during that time, and then I lectured psychology, and I taught English and so on. So I did start to grow out of it.
You don't want any fish. You must have chicken. This fish has wheat on it, boy. It'll burn you, eh?
Yeah.
Australians breathe fire.
And now I think of my kids as people I used to know, and I'm getting to know them as people in their own rights, not so much only as my children, which is nice. It's a nice place to be. We used to spend a lot of time on the beach. That's what we did. And I went to Glen Beach one day, and I saw these chaps out on the water on these things. And when one of them came back to the beach, I asked him if I could have a turn. And that was a surfboard, and that moment was a moment that changed my life. I fell in love with it. I paddled out. And I think I selfishly hung onto that board and I didn't take it back to him straight away. It was like, if you can put an emotion to cream, it was like cream. It was smooth. It was, like if you can put a color to it, it was purple. It was royal. It was glorious, glorious. It was thrilling. Exciting, it was soothing, and it was challenging, all in one little session. The first time, I can't remember whether I stood up straight away. I must have. Yeah, I didn't own my own board until some months later. There were a few chaps, Sea Point boys they were back then, who came to Glen Beach, and I was on this borrowed board, and I met up with these chaps, and they told me that they built surfboards at Jeff Fish, his name was, in his garage in Sea Point. And they invited me round, and maybe the first time I arrived there was this chap in these grubby grey flannels with fiberglass and resin all over, and he had the most beautiful blue eyes and this sort of shy sort of smile.
I used to live with a friend in Sea Point, and we used to make surfboards at night. They all worked, but I would be at home from studying or whatever. And then she came around, and that's kind of how we met and got to know each other. And then it just went very well from there onwards. I took her to a New Year's Eve party, and that's actually when we started, the 1st of January 1965.
50 years on, Alan still, every 1st of the month, wishes me happy month anniversary. He's not particularly romantic, but he remembers to do that. Happy month anniversary.
Well, she was very pretty and very vibrant and very much an outgoing personality and really just fun to be with.
Yeah, we used to go out surfing together. We went on trips together, but he doesn't surf much now. He only surfs when we go on holiday. He's a holiday surfer. But that's fine, because I'm free to do my thing. That's my passion. This is a redo of a badge that we had. We had a club back in the 60s, Seal Surf Club, and it was a girls-only surf club. And now there are 3 of us that are surfing again in our 60s. Really? I'll put your board away, right? It's got a leash. Right. Put those in your board. Then I normally have a little one. And at the bottom, I can't get the bottom of it on me. That's for you know your board's got a crack here, Bern.
Actually, we were the seals, but the 3 of us are now the turtles, because seals pass on a little bit sooner than turtles, and we want to go on forever. So those are the 3 turtles, which I think is quite novel. These 3 turtles represent the 3 of us, having seen us through the career of surfing for 50 years. I stopped, and then I started again when I turned 60, which is a bit silly, but I'm loving it. Yeah.
Jamie, who's my youngest child and my only son. I've got 3 daughters, and then Jamie. He started surfing, but because I took him surfing, I would be sitting watching, and I wasn't the sitting watching sort. And I thought, why not? Why not? So again, I borrowed a board, an old junkie board from my cousin, and I started, and I was the only woman then surfing, the only older woman. There were younger, really hot shots surfing. There was a 25-year gap, which is a lot. And I think Jamie benefited because he got lifts to surfing. And he sort of wasn't the type of teenager that was embarrassed by his parents.
I'm connected to Bernie just through a friendship. We've been surfing together for, probably 15 years. When she wakes up in the morning, she SMSs me and I SMS her, and we decide where we're going to go surf, and then we connect and go surfing. Every now and then people give her a little bit of grief in the water, but it's usually people that are absolutely clueless, because, I mean, she knows what she's doing. She's very good on a surfboard. She's totally competent. And, yeah, I mean, for that, people do generally give her the waves she wants. But you do get, I mean, pretty male-obsessed people that don't share with her, but that's to their detriment, because, yeah, they're probably just jealous that she'll do more on a wave than they will.
A lot of women, in fact, say, oh, I would love to do that. And then I say, well, come along, and then there's a lot of little excuses, you know. And I always feel that the person who's going to do it will go and do it. They don't need you to take them along. Because all the women that I know that have started surfing have done it off their own cuff. 4 years ago, I think it is, I had both my hips replaced. I had arthritis, and it got to the stage that I couldn't surf. It was just too sore. Eventually, I went to an orthopedic chap, and he said straight away what it was. And then we had x-rays, and he confirmed that it would never get better, it would only get worse. And I said to them, right, tomorrow, whenever, let's do it. And I want them both done at the same time. I don't want to have to go through it twice. And then, yeah, I had them both done, and I haven't looked back.
Now you must go and wash.
No, I'm going to go
Wash your hands, wash your ears. This is how you get ear infections and nose and eye infections. And like what York got, orbital cellulitis.
shower.
I don't surf there ever.
I'll pass the surf. Oh, let's go have a shower. Yeah, have a shower.
I'll stop bitching.
Sunflare, washing out and shower. Good
Do
one,
you like
Tess.
surfing in the pool?
Yeah, yes, those dolphins gave me a fright for about 30 seconds. Those dolphins, I got up and I watched and I was like, woo! That's not why the water's brown, by the way.
Not from the dolphins or from you soiling yourself.
No, absolutely. So I'm going to grab a coffee now.
I still find it refreshing to be able to tell people that my mum surfs. I still think it's, you know, at however old she is. I remember I kind of expected as a preteen or as a teenager, expected to be teased or expected some sort of, you know, derogatory comments when I told people that my mum surfed, but I never really got them. Everyone just thought it was so cool. It's like, told me how lucky I was that my mom could take me surfing every weekend. And
How often do you surf?
I wake up wanting to surf, but I don't surf every day. That's
No, that's only because you're on granny duty.
I'm on granny duty.
You got to take the grandkids to swimming lessons.
No, this is where you become a very devious granny and you start lying to your children. I've got a headache because you've just checked the surf report. Muizenberg's got more women in the water than anywhere else in the world. But you know,
there were like 10 of us in the 80s.
It's the wave for a beginner, but it's a wave for the people from naught to... How old are you? Yeah, well, 70 about.
She won her division in the South African Longboard Championships last year. Look, she's going to be surfing till she's 88, if not more.
Other than to say that I think I'm very privileged, incredibly privileged to lead this life and to mix with the people that I do mix with, because it's a very different from my normal age cohorts, normal people that I mix with, and it's a great privilege to be accepted by youngsters, and it's not tolerated; it's accepted.